What's the most Michael Scottish thing your boss ever did? Story 1. We had mice. Boss man was terrified of mice and a total skinflint who didn't want to pay for an exterminator. His big idea, I crap you not, was to give me cotton to put in my ears and a blowhorn. He then opened the back door, closed all other doors in the little shop, and I had to attempt to herd mice out of the store with an air horn, with cotton balls sticking out of my ears. I tried to explain why it wouldn't work, but he essentially told me not to worry my pretty little head over it, and that was my entire afternoon. Most ridiculous thing I've ever done at a job ever before and ever since. Story 2. I had a boss, Dave, who was head of sales, and he was notorious for taking people's food out of the fridge or off their desk to eat right in front of them. He was also always late for meetings. Well, one day we were sitting in an all-managers meeting, and Dave came in late as usual with his always present cup of coffee and sat down. There was a small lull in the meeting, and Dave looks across the table at Katie, who just had a baby, and says, "Katie, I hope you don't mind, but I used the rest of your milk in the fridge." Katie turned pale and looked at him with the most embarrassed and angry look and said, "That's my breast milk I have been pumping for my baby." Dave just sat there, looked her square in the eye, and without breaking his gaze, sipped his coffee the rest of the meeting. Story 3. A few coworkers and I competed in a local office-themed trivia contest. We came in second place, and one of the prizes was a World's Best Boss mug. We brought it into work and displayed it proudly like a trophy in one of our offices. My boss, who was not involved in the contest, has never seen the office, is not friends with or well-liked by any of us, and is a huge idiot, saw the mug in someone else's office and just took it. None of us could figure out where it had gone until we saw her drinking out of it. Story 4. I had a boss who got a promotion to senior manager. The very next day, he pulled into the parking lot with a Mercedes A-Class. No one on my team even knew they made a Class, cheapest possible Mercedes/badge car. He gets out wearing a Mercedes Polo and a white Mercedes hat. He offered to take me to lunch in it. He jumps on the highway, adjusts his Mercedes hat, and says to me, "I don't exactly do 60 in this thing." There's a little triumphant laughter and starts going 80. There was a cop on the bridge above us. We were immediately pulled over. I will never forget the look of defeat on his face. Story 5. This is a story from my brother. He works at a credit union, and one morning around 10 his boss walks out of his office asking if anyone wants the other half he cut off this huge bran muffin he had for breakfast. Everyone there said they were fine, and the boss went back into his office. Later, around 12, an employee comes in for her shift with a box full of donuts to share with the office. Everyone came up and took one, thanking the employee for bringing in the treat. The boss was visibly mad that everyone went for the donuts, and no one wanted his half of his bran muffin. He was just a big grump for the rest of the day. Story 6. We had a particularly demanding client, and a couple of the project managers were having trouble keeping him pleased. After hearing them complain, Larry, the boss, pulled out his flip phone and said, "Let's call him right now," and put him on speakerphone. After making a show of being the tough guy and putting him in his place, he got in the last word, flipped the phone closed, and put it in his shirt pocket. He proudly told the room, "You see, that's how you handle an bumhole." Then, from his pocket, we heard, "I'm still here, sir." Larry fumbled for his phone while stammering, hung it up correctly, and dismissed us. Story 7. I honestly don't know if this is Michael Scott behavior, but this was absolutely insane, and I don't know how else to categorize it. Context: we were having an all-hands meeting where the CEO of a small company, 50-ish employees, announced that he had just fired the CFO for embezzlement. We all knew he was full of dumb, and he fired the CFO because she disagreed with the decision. Anyhow, right after he announced this, he offered $100 as a moral booster to anyone who could sing the entire Tigger song from Winnie the Pooh. Yeah, so one brave girl gets up and starts singing the whole song. She gets to the last line and messes up one word. The CEO says that it doesn't count, pockets his own $100 bill, then proceeds to sing and dance to the whole song while we stand there, watching him, mouths agape. When he finishes, striking a maniacal pose with, and I'm the only one, we are all eerily silent. He then straightens up, unbuttons his suit jacket, and shows us the lyrics to the song have been embroidered on the inner lining. I'm 40 years old and have been working as a professional for 22 years. I've seen some dumb stuff, but I've never seen anything remotely as crazy as this, and I pray that I never do again. Story 8. She told me I could take a day off when I was dealing with some severe insomnia problems. then came running into my office 5 minutes later to say too many people had the day off already, 2 people, whose jobs didn't overlap with mine. Turns out it was because she wanted to take a half day and didn't want the place to look unstaffed. Yesterday, however, she did take the day off when multiple other people were out and left us with just 2 people of 6. She has also brought her soy milk maker into the office and kept talking about it. She was also using the lunchroom toaster oven to make cakes, but not for us. She also, just last week, started telling people all about her UTI. In particular, in front of the brand new employee that was at that moment being introduced to her. She also buys food for her daughters using the company credit card when she is supposed to be out shopping for things for the company. So far, she has not been caught. Oh, and most recently, she asked a coworker to try not to schedule her mother's funeral anywhere within the 3-week span that she would be taking her vacation because that wouldn't be convenient. She said it somewhat, but not completely, jokingly, but brought it up more than once. I could go on. She's like the more malicious version of Michael Scott you see in the earliest episodes. Story 9. First morning of the summer camp I worked at, our camp director brings the campers, 1st through 3rd graders, to the basketball court. Gives a fun speech while bouncing a kickball around to kick off the camp. Ends it with, "All right guys, let's have a great summer." And punts the kickball, accidentally, straight into a 1st grader's face who falls to the ground and starts crying very loudly. This is just the first one I thought of. I was making the Michael Scott comparisons from the first day I met him. Story 10. After a successful project, the owner of the company invited everyone out to lunch, about 12 employees, at a nearby restaurant by the office. Little did she know, the place was very expensive, so she bounces early before the check comes, stating that she had a client call. She gives us money to pay for her meal and takes off, leaving the rest of us to figure out the check. It also turns out she didn't give us enough money to pay for her portion of the check, so someone had to throw in a few extra bucks to cover that. Story 11. I knew there would finally be a perfect time and place for me to share this story. I used to work for a Broadway theater producer, and we were in a meeting about the ADA, the act that requires places of business to accommodate the disabled. Like Michael Scott, our VP had come to his position through no merits of his own and had no idea what he was doing, let alone how to run a meeting. So he starts us off with, "Okay, so we're going to go around, and I want us all to share if we know someone who's disabled." It was just like when Ed Truck dies and he's asking people to share stories of loved ones dying. As people are awkwardly sharing, our boss is completely detached from the touch-shines of the subject. Every time someone talks about their crippled granny or terminally ill cousin, he's like, "This is good. Really getting the juices flowing here." One of the senior managers said, "Well, boss, as you know, my uncle had Parkinson's," to which my boss replies, "Oh, great. Was he in a wheelchair?" Then we watch the office industry the ADA puts out, specifically the scene of wheelchairs-bound customers. As it finishes, and we're talking, the next chapter starts up on the projector. It's midgets. Our boss stops the meeting and is like, "Who midgets we have to watch?" So then we watched midgets. It was not a productive meeting. Story 12. She would do almost no work at all. She would come into our offices and bother us while we were working, talking about how bored she was and how we should redecorate our offices. Any work she got, she would just forward the emails to someone and never even read them herself. Then she would often decide how we needed to change the furniture in her office, move things around, and paint a wall in her office. She would call meetings 3 times a day to talk about nonsense, and they would go for about an hour each time on nothing. Story 13. This is previous job, but some examples. First one. One of my coworkers is black and loves chocolate. He was talking to the boss one day and mentioned something along the lines of wishing he had some chocolate right now. Boss, "Who needs that when we got some milk chocolate right here?" Referring to my coworker. Second one. Another time, it was the Friday before a long weekend, and I was getting ready to head out. He comes up to me and asks me what I'm up to. I said not too much, hoping for a relaxing weekend. He then makes a fist motion with his hands and goes, "Make sure you don't do too much, eh?" Third one. One of my coworkers was having a fight with her boyfriend and was telling me about it. He walks by and listens in on the conversation and goes, "Oh, I know someone who's not getting laid tonight." Fourth one. We went to a work event, and one of the team-building exercises was that you and your colleagues are stuck on a desert island with specific items, and you have to figure out how to use them to survive together. At the end of the exercise, when it came time for us to describe our strategies, he referred to one of the groups that had 1 girl and 5 guys in it, going, and these guys have one woman and a bunch of dudes. I think we all know what that means. He was a character, not a bad guy by any means, and he's generally fairly nice and considerate. Just really tone-deaf and inappropriate sometimes. Story 14. We had this new girl hostess start working at my job, and she was a pretty 20-something girl with a pretty big bottom. So one day, good old boss man walks into the dining area and sees the new girl and says out loud, "Hey Amanda, did they paint those pants on you in front of a table she was working at?" And she ended up crying and left the job not too long after that. Story 15. HR mandated personal development course. They did them every year, and they always centered around not discriminating in some way, based on gender, age, religion, etc. Well, one year they had a new lady in charge of it. The topic was invisible disabilities. Basically, some form of disability which is not visually apparent, OCD, developmental disorders, etc. The task we had was to write down a list of challenges a person with a disability might face in everyday life. Then we had to act out a scene showing how these challenges would affect them. We asked her to clarify, and it became apparent she was literally asking us to stereotype disabled people and basically mock their daily lives. That HR lady was not present for any of the future rounds of training. Story 16. I work with handicapped and elderly people. I'm a face-to-face. My boss is scheduling and programming. She has yelled at stroke victims because she can't understand them, hung up on elderly who can't understand what she's saying, and refused access to people who cannot pay full price for the service because she thinks they're scamming. We are a nonprofit and receive multiple donations and bursaries to assist people in financial need. She asks casual drivers to work for free and won't fire anyone, just never calls them. She is astonishingly inept and is the first point of contact for anyone using our service. Many people don't understand it's not me on the phone, so that's always fun when she's been a moron. She has a physical handicap herself, so her lack of compassion for the people we assist is really disappointing. She hung up on a woman who doesn't speak English as a first language because she couldn't understand her just 20 minutes ago, and the woman is understandably upset. She answers to a board of senior citizens in a small town, and they are all just so impressed by her because she uses a cane that they make allowances for completely inappropriate behavior that I would be dismissed for in a heartbeat. It's time to find a new job. Story 17. Mandatory Staff Appreciation Day. We are encouraged to come in on our day off with the promise of getting paid for the party. They talked about how it was a 1970s theme, and it was going to be a lot of fun with games and such. My boss convinced me to grow out my sideburns and disco it up. For starters, I walked into work, and the idiot 20-somethings I worked with were all dressed as hippies. No disco anything, all hippies. Then my boss is there, the two of us the only ones looking at a distant disco, and he commences with the festivities. First, we did a PowerPoint presentation. Then he kicked off karaoke for which he had pre-selected the songs and the participants. Then he told us all to line up and collect one ice cream sandwich each and return to work. Everyone was a disappointment that day, and I learned that I was Dwight in that office. Story 18. I worked for a radio station once and we were hiring a new employee to do sales. Pretty much all of the afternoon we were supposed to do job interviews to find a new salesperson. I was the sales manager, and in the interviews with me was the general manager. He was this big giant man, huge, sweaty, sloppy, super weird and uncouth, and I had gone over all the interview rules with him before, like stop asking how old people are, that's illegal. He was doing better, and then all of a sudden this particular afternoon he just went screw it all. He asked a lady if she was married, and how long she was married for, and if they had kids or if they were trying ha-ha. He asked a guy which branch of military service he was in, and why he rented an apartment. Why are you poor, or something. When he asked a lady if she was a gay woman, I just sat there aghast. It was one of the most uncomfortable Michael Scottish moments I've ever been a part of in my life. Story 19. I organized a meal for my team on a holiday, and each member pitched in $10 for a total of $50. I, being their supervisor/leader, pitched in $50 for a total of $100. My wife and I prepared the meal, barbecue ribs, corn on the cob, and a salad. It was a lot of food for a small team. Boss was informed of the plans with plenty of time, and he had confirmed participation, and even told me he'd help out with the money. He showed up, ate, took some home, never pitched in. Story 20. Offered to give everyone in the office a $100 bill, but said the new receptionist had to sing in front of the entire company or nobody would get paid. She was mortified, but complied and he went around handing out $100 bills. He then told everyone they had to post pictures of the money on Facebook and tell everyone he was the best boss, and he'd check Facebook to make sure. This was one of many awful things he did. That's a wrap for this video. Make sure to leave your relatable story down in the comments. I would love to make a video on them. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you next time.